All right. Hello, everyone. I think we're going to get started with the meeting now, with the panel now. So yeah, thank you to everyone who is coming to our third panel in the Now Panel series. This panel is part 3 of a series of 4 panels that will be focused on educating teens about various topics within the broader topic of climate change. And this panel will focus on the topic of environmental activism, and we will talk a little bit about why that's so important and also about the individual experiences that several of these experienced climate activists have had in this field. And as our world continues to be affected by the climate crisis, it is really important to continue fighting for a more sustainable and just future through both individual action and climate activism. So during today's panel, again, we'll be hearing a little bit more about why that's so important and talk a little bit about the experiences of all of these amazing climate activists. For your reference, my name is Ellen Kim. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a sophomore in high school. And I've been working to educate other youth about climate change for a year or two now. And I'm currently working with the Youth Climate Ambassador, or YCA program with the San Mateo County Office of Sustainability and Office of Education to create these panels, and I will be your moderator today. So I'm going to go into some introductions of all of our panelists. Our first panelist is Aaron Feigelman, who is a climate activist since high school when he led a movement to convince his school district officials to install solar panels at the schools in his area. He's now working with the Kawa Project, which is focused on recycling agricultural waste into chemicals for personal care products and food. And he's still very interested in exploring the possible renewable energy sources. So Aaron, it would be great if you could say hi a little bit, introduce yourself, and talk a bit about what you've been doing and your experience.
Yeah, really glad to be here and speak to you all. I was not that long ago, in 2014, I kind of got into the whole climate movement, and I was in high school, I was a junior, and I learned that, we didn't have solar panels in my school district, which was in Benicia, California, kind of in the Northeast Bay. And I wanted to kind of create this movement toward installing them all around the school district. So I worked for 4 years in high school and college on installing about $5.5 million of panels all across the district. And it was just this great learning experience for learning about kind of perseverance, persistence, and patience. And now I'm actually starting a company involving food waste reuse for consumer products.
Great, thank you so much. Our second panelist is Alan Matlidge, who currently works with the Citizens Climate Lobby, or CCL. And he's also been an activist since high school, and he's helped work on local candidate campaigns, create petitions, and served as the advisor for his college's nonviolent alternative student group. He has served on the Hyattsville, Maryland Environmental Committee and helped launch a small solar energy company. And he has worked with the CCL for a while now, and he's served as the liaison for Jackie Spear. And Alan, if you could introduce yourself a little bit and talk about your experience through some of these things as well, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Ellen, and thank you for having me on this panel. Yes, I've been concerned about various social and political issues since I was in high school. And I'm going to say it was about 10, 15 years ago where it became clear through some conversations I had with actually a climate denier that it was important to really begin focusing on climate. And over those years, I've more and more concentrated my political efforts on trying to create a more livable future. In 2016, I moved here to California. I had previously been living near Washington, D.C. in Maryland, near Washington, D.C. And I moved to California and I joined this group, Citizens Climate Lobby. The reason I joined that group is because they are focused on federal issues, which I had been interested in, and I knew very little about local California issues being new. So I got hooked up with Citizens Climate Lobby and became the liaison to Representative Spear, Citizens Climate Lobby's representatives liaison to her from Citizens Climate Lobby. And I've been to Washington, D.C. on numerous occasions lobbying that office. And that's primarily what Citizens Climate Lobby does, is it brings together ordinary citizens and trains them on how to become effective lobbyists for the climate. So anyway, I'm very happy to be with this panel. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Our third panelist is Anaya Butler, who is a published poet, spoken word artist, activist, community organizer, and a high school student. She's currently working with the Youth the Apocalypse organization and helps to organize and lead strikes in her area. One of her goals is to lift up Black and Brown communities and youth because she knows that those are some of the frontline communities in the climate crisis. So Anaya, if you could kind of introduce yourself as well, talk a little bit about your experience through Youth the Apocalypse or any other organizations you've participated with, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Anaya Butler. Sorry, there's some construction going around in case you hear the background noise. But I'm a lead circle member of Youth vs. Apocalypse. For those who don't know, YVA is a Bay Area-based group full of frontline youth, fighting for climate justice while advocating for social justice. And also uplifting the voices of youth and people of color, because we know that these have to be the spearheaders of the climate justice movement. And so lately, we recently launched our national campaign, This Is the Time, really telling adults, go out there and vote, and also holding youth accountable to, organizing within their communities to get other young people to vote and get them, active in the climate justice movement.
Thank you so much. So our fourth panelist is Katerina Gaines, another high school student and activist who also works with Youth the Apocalypse. She's been part of this movement for years and currently serves as one of the Green New Deal campaign coordinators at YVA. And she has also started a school club that raises awareness and takes action against climate injustices and hopes to continue to get more involved and work towards a more sustainable and just future. So Katerina, it would be great if you were also able to introduce yourself briefly and talk a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. So my name is Katerina. A couple of years ago, I'm a junior right now, and in my sophomore year, I started a club for climate justice at my school, and right now we're working towards educating ourselves and others, and also uplifting the work of other climate justice organizations, such as participating in their actions, which lately have mostly been online, but previous years we've worked on like going to strikes and protests. And then earlier this year, I joined the Youth vs. Apocalypse Fellowship, and now I'm also a lead circle member. And then recently I became one of the coordinators for the Green New Deal campaign. And we are working towards creating and also passing Green New Deal legislation on a local, state, and federal level.
Great, thank you so much. And our fifth and final panelist is Madeline Dyke, who is currently a college senior, who's taking a gap semester to help organize for climate candidates running for the Senate in the 2020 election. And she's a co-founder of a group called the Climate Change Makers, which is a nonpartisan volunteer-based community for those looking to take action against climate change. And these volunteers dedicate around an hour of their time every week to work towards these climate solutions. So Madeline, if you wanted to kind of speak on your experience a little bit as well, that would be great.
Hi, everybody. Ellen, thanks so much for putting this together and for inviting me. I'm Madeline, she, her pronouns, and I'm a rising senior in college. Like Ellen said, I'm taking the semester off to really get political in the name of climate. And that's sort of the thesis that Climate Change Makers operates on, that the political arena is the place where we can have the greatest climate impact, whether it's at the national, state, or local level. We're a relatively new organization. We sort of spun up about 3 months ago and have mobilized so many volunteers who were previously on the sidelines with our sort of very simple 1 hour a week is all it takes message. We've got some high school students, we've got some grandmothers, we've got CEOs, we've got artists and scientists. It's a really dynamic community, and that's really kind of what we're all about. Up until now, we've been organizing 4 Senate candidates. We'll be continuing that work with all eyes on Georgia until the runoffs end on January 5th. And then after that, we'll be sort of transitioning to advocacy in a more global sense. That's kind of a big, scary word, and hopefully we can get into what advocacy means, what political advocacy for climate looks like when it's not simply knocking doors and calling phones for an election.
Great, thank you so much. And just something to tell the audience, everyone can ask questions to one or all of the panelists through the live chat of this video, which you should see on your right, on the right of the video if you're on a computer, or underneath it if you're on your phone. And we will try to get through as many of those questions as possible during the 1 hour that we have set for this panel, and work those ideas into our conversation. And I just wanted to add a quick note before we start. None of the panelists or myself will be commenting or really answering that many questions about one candidate or specific political campaign during this panel. But we will be willing to talk about generally the fact that it's important for us to be voting for climate candidates and trying to support them as much as we can. So my first question for a couple of you to answer would be, what inspired you to take climate action through activism? If you can remember one specific point or one specific thing that inspired you to kind of start working on this, would you mind sharing that with everyone? Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll jump in here just to start things off. I mentioned that I became interested in climate change because of a conversation that I had with a climate denier, and that might be too harsh, a climate skeptic. He called himself a climate agnostic. He was one of my high school teachers, and we hooked up through Facebook about 10, 15 years ago, and we started talking about climate, and he was very, very much interested in telling me about how there was so much doubt about the science. And so I started kind of digging into the research in order to have a conversation with him. And as I looked more and more at that research, it just became clear to me that the climate problem is an overwhelmingly important problem, and that all of the concerns that I had in the past, political concerns that I had in the past, really needed to be seen from the framework of climate, because we really are talking about, when we talk about an existential problem, this is truly a problem that threatens huge numbers of species on the planet and may ultimately bring about the collapse of organized global society. So we really just have to deal with it, and we have to deal with it immediately. And that came through this research that I did by having a conversation, a reasonable, respectful conversation with someone with whom I disagreed.
Can I jump in next and say yes, 100%? You're touching on the intersectional nature of the climate crisis and the fact that all of our solutions need to be intersectional, and 100% with you on that. I think for me, and part of the reason why I think Climate Change Makers has a really important job to do in the political sphere is because I thought I wanted to study science in college. I thought I wanted to be a biologist. And I had this sort of aha moment that, like, we have the technical solutions to abate our carbon emissions. Like, we have the technical solutions. We even have policy drafted, all different types of policy, proposing all sorts of different solutions, but we don't have the political will to implement those policies and those technical solutions. Our problem is political. Like, we've got youth in the streets demanding change. We've got folks saying climate is a big issue for me, all through the exit polls from November 3rd. That was a huge takeaway for me. Like, the majority of the country is ready for climate action. So we need to make sure that we sort of translate that into real government action, because that's sort of where the big lever is that we can really pull on.
Great. Yeah, thank you both so much for those answers. Does anyone else want to kind of share and speak on that idea of, like, what has inspired you to take this action that you're taking right now?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry.
I'll just, so I got into this when I was in high school, and I actually spent some time in the rainforest and the Amazon. And before that, I didn't really care that much about climate movement. But going to the rainforest and kind of and seeing how it's definitely being affected by climate change really made me kind of, and also seeing the beauty of the rainforest and learning about how there's so many amazing, medicines that are actually we use now that are derived from the rainforest plant species. So I saw it as this kind of issue that I want to be a part of, and I really felt this emotional connection to it. And I met a fellow there in the rainforest who he actually runs a program called Sustainable Summer, and it's actually based in New Hampshire. And I recommend any of you guys to look this up, because it's an amazing program called Sustainable Summer. And he told me that, I can have an impact even though I'm 15, 16 years old, and I just got to go out there and do it. And he said that, you can do a $5 million+ project, but you just got to get the experts involved. And he gave me the confidence that I needed to actually go out there and basically, be the person in the middle who organizes and get all the experts involved. So I would say to you guys, it's just a matter of taking action.
Thank you. Anaya, did you have something that you wanted to kind of touch on for that question?
Yeah, I started, becoming a climate activist and organized it last year in 8th grade. I'm currently a freshman in high school. When I learned more about climate change, it was sort of brought to me as like this white-led thing, like if you only have privilege, you can really fight for it. And so I thought I didn't have a place in it. But as I started to learn more about climate change and more the effects and who it's affecting, I started to learn that, it was affecting Black and Indigenous communities at a disproportionate rate. And so I felt like that, why isn't one speaking on this? Why isn't one fighting for this? And so, learning more about environmental racism is what really pushed me to become a climate advocate and become a climate activist, because before becoming a climate activist, I talked a lot more about police brutality and oppression towards Black people, white people. And so, learning about how Black people are not only being killed by police, but also being killed, by literally white supremacy and capitalism due to climate change, it really, kind of changed my perspective of everything and pushed me to become a climate activist.
Yeah, I just wanted to also say what inspired me. I think in middle school, that's when I first was like, I have to do something about this. After I watched this documentary called Before the Flood, which basically scared the bejesus out of me, because it just showed how different countries are being affected, who's getting disproportionately affected, and also showing like the aspect of how like different ecosystems are literally being destroyed. So I would say that, like Anaya was saying, this issue was brought to me as something, I don't know if I want to say like as a far away issue, as in like this isn't impacting people, this is more impacting like polar bears and coral reefs and like whatever, you know. And I've always been really passionate about protecting nature, so I think that's where I first got really interested. And then as I continued to learn more about this issue, I realized that this is so much bigger than just saving polar bears or rainforests or whatever. This is literally like saving humanity. And there are people, like Anaya was saying, who are getting disproportionately like affected and impacted and literally getting their lungs and bodies poisoned because of fossil fuel infrastructures that are getting placed into their communities at disproportionate rates. And I think we need to acknowledge that, like, there are people literally dying and getting poisoned right now and getting lung cancer and all sorts of health like issues because of environmental racism and because of the structure of our government that allows these communities to continue to be marginalized by climate change and all sorts of other injustices in our society. And yeah, I think as I joined the Youth vs. Apocalypse Fellowship is when I really woke up to the fact that this is so much bigger than just like, let's save like nature. Like this is literally like we just need to fight for everyone because people are being affected right now, like at this moment. And I think that's often ignored when talked about climate change. Like environmental racism, all these other issues are often put on the back burner. And I think we can't do that anymore because people are literally dying and getting poisoned, and we can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I want to thank all of you for sharing all those stories. And I think that it is really important for us to be addressing how climate change is impacting real people right now. And it's not impacting everyone the same way. And it's really important for us to be recognizing that and working to help assist with that, if that makes sense. But also lifting up other people who might be part of marginalized communities who are being disproportionately affected. And continuing just furthering the fight. So my question kind of leading off of that is, why is climate activism particularly so important when people could do things like reducing their own personal waste or using a reusable straw and things like that? So why is that something that's so important to you, or just in general to making actual change?
I can go ahead for now. Are you asking like why is it important to do more than just like focus on your own like carbon footprint and like why? Okay. So I think a lot of corporations and big businesses will tell us that if we recycle, if we compost, if we buy an electric car, if we do all these things, that climate change will be solved. But in reality, I think that's really not the case, because while I think it is extremely important to work on trying to create a sustainable life for yourself, and overall, I do think that's a beneficial and great way to live. Climate change is a bigger issue than just something that we can do on an individual level, because it is perpetuated every single day by our government and our systems around the world. And our government sadly will not change if we start recycling or composting or whatever it is that we're doing. And climate change is so much bigger than just like, like CO2 emissions. Like it is hurting people right now, and we need to start advocating for those people, and we need to start uplifting voices that have been marginalized since the beginning of our country's foundation. And yeah, we need to push for systemic change as soon as we possibly can, because that is the only way that I believe that we can really, make change, because there's only so much you can do as an individual, because together we can really get to where we need to go, as I see it.
Yeah, I totally agree with Carolina. To touch on some things she said, a lot of people think if you stop using plastic straws that you can change things right now, but you really can't. You have to really, start making government change, because climate change is not only, about the environment, it's also a government issue. Climate change has gotten this worse because of white supremacy, colonialism, capitalism, and really all forms of oppression. And so when we look at all of the social issues and climate issues we have in this country, those are really the roots, all those oppressive systems. And so, we really have to dismantle all of these systems to live in a sustainable world, but also a world that is, based off just plain compassion and equity and justice for all people, including people of color. And so, really having that systemic change, like what Katerina said, is really important in achieving climate justice.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that it is really important for us to be working towards these larger scale solutions. And I think that you guys touched on some really great things there. So I kind of wanted to transition a little bit into some of your experiences working as climate activists, since you all have been working in activism for several years or maybe your entire lives. So one of the things I just wanted to throw out and ask for anyone who wanted to answer was, what was one of the best things that has happened, or the most impactful and new things that's happened during your career as a climate activist or as an activist in general? Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys want to share any of those experiences, of something good that's come out or good that's been happening.
Well, I'd love to jump in on that. It was February 12th, 2019, was that right? Yeah, 2019, my birthday, when our representative Jackie Spear told me that she was prepared to, and she would be signing on as a co-sponsor to a bill that we had been trying to get her to co-sponsor for a couple of years. The bill is HR 763, the Energy Innovation and Dividend Act. It is the kind of main piece of legislation that Citizens Climate Lobby is trying to put in place. What it does is it puts a price on carbon. It does so by creating essentially a corporate tax, taxing fossil fuel corporations for the emissions that their products will produce, greenhouse gas emissions that their products will produce. And it takes the revenue from that tax and distributes it to everybody in the country on a per capita basis. And as a result, what that will wind up doing, because it increases every year, the tax increases every year, it will reduce the viability in the market of fossil fuels, and it will promote clean, renewable energy. And because the money is distributed to everybody on an equal basis, it is progressive with regard to its economic consequences. About 2/3 of people are made better off as a result of that, particularly people in the lowest income. So it holds up two things that are really important to me. One is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and secondly, it is economically progressive. So when Jackie Spear signed on to that particular bill, we had some champagne.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Did anyone else have an experience similar to that, or just something maybe small that's happened that's inspired you to keep going, or that's been like a big success for you personally?
If nobody else says anything, I can jump in and say there aren't any, I don't have an equivalent moment to Alan, this, victory celebration moment, but rather every single day, the circle just gets bigger. I find more folks who are doing the work that we're all doing in different ways, with different targets, with different sort of ethos, under a different ethos, but we're all headed in the same direction. And I think every time I see a new Twitter thread in which different climate folks are getting introduced to each other, or every time I do a panel like this and like learn about youth versus apocalypse, for example, like the more inspired I get to keep going with climate change makers, because it's a validation that the work that we're doing is really important and that there are so many different people out there trying to generate support, because we need everybody off of the sidelines. And there's so many orgs out there, climate groups, where you can find your home. And yeah, just like the people that I get to work with through this work are what keeps me going and what gets me inspired.
Great, thank you so much. Aaron, did you have anything that you might want to share on this question?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. So I come more from like the corporate, I guess, background and more interested in the business side of things. So most recently, what really excited me was there's this company called Stripe, which is a payment processor company. You probably all used it if you buy anything online. It basically allows internet e-commerce companies to do really quick payment transactions. And they recently, a couple of weeks ago, maybe even last week, are allowing the businesses who use their platform to offset their emissions seamlessly. And because they have such a massive distribution network with businesses across the world, that is actually a huge statement for them, and also just allowing these companies to very quickly and without any effort offset their emissions is really big. And I think it'll have a lot of compounding effects. And it also is a big statement for other large tech companies to do similar things. So that was pretty inspiring. And of course, like on my own personal level, I would say the last time I was really inspired, like, seriously inspired and motivated. Well, I mean, with this project that I'm working on now, I mean, I'm in the very early stages of this collar project company. So I've been working on it for like 9 months, and I'm just launching this first product now. But the success I had most recently, I guess, was with this solar project that was finished about a year and a half ago, and just seeing going around my hometown to all the different schools and seeing these huge solar arrays all around the city, it makes me feel really inspired, and honestly hard to believe that it actually worked out. But at the same time, it just goes to show that if you work on something for like 4+ years, your effort kind of your efforts to output kind of scales exponentially. So you don't really feel the effects of it for the first couple of years, but it's sort of that experience really taught me about the power.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, all of those are really amazing, and they sound like great experiences, and I want to thank you all for sharing them. And this might be kind of a harder question to answer, but I was wondering if any of you had either a particular experience or just in general, any negative things that have come with working in this field for so long, maybe like a mental strain, or just in general, like the amount of time that it's taking, things like that. Has there been any negative impacts of environmental activism, or not necessarily negative, but just some drawbacks or things that you've had to deal with? And if so, how did you address them and deal with them in your life?
I can jump in here and just say the climate crisis is this fireball coming at us. Like, that's how we need to treat it. And that is scary. That is so, so scary. And to pretend that that doesn't cause feelings of anxiety or depression or it's scary, man. It makes you freak out like anything should. I mean, you should be scared about it, but that's a huge mental burden to carry. And I think the sooner that we can address that and name it, the better. And kind of going back to my earlier answer, like working in community and finding solace in our relationships and reminding ourselves of who and where our support networks are, you know, like really leaning into your family and your friends who don't work in this space, getting a reprieve, a little break, and really digging in with the folks who you do work with in this space and reminding each other that you're here in solidarity together. That's how I deal with the impending crisis.
Well, that really resonates with me. I mean, that's exactly true. The getting together with people who are also working on this project really creates social bonds and really you can make it fun because you get to know these people and you get to work with them. So that's really something that has kept me going. For a while, I was very concerned about the science of climate change. I was looking at all of the awful things that were taking place, and you read the news and that's pretty much all you read about climate change is all the awful things that are happening. And it got to the point where I became fairly depressed about it. But then I realized, well, I know this stuff and I know that these things are going to happen. Why am I continuing to read the headlines and read the articles about these things? So I simply stopped doing that and started reading about all of the ways in which we're making progress and all the avenues that are open to us, the opportunities to really make some changes. And as you do more and more of that, and as you get involved with more, or as I did more of that, and as I got more involved with working with people who are decision makers, politicians who are decision makers who can really make these things different, my attitude changed quite a bit. And now, yes, I do sometimes get a little down about where things are, but for the most part, it's easier to carry on if you don't dwell on these things you already know about.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Anaya. You go.
Thank you, Katarina. I was just gonna say, as an organizer, I'm constantly trying to educate myself more about climate change and things that are happening every day as the climate crisis gets worse, and sometimes that can be draining. And so I'm a poet, so some of the things I do is really sit down and write, and that's how I get some of my really, I guess, good poetry. So that's how I do it. And also remembering that I'm still 14 and that try to make time to talk to my friends or just sometimes take a nap and just relax and take self-care time. I feel like that's so important as an organizer because we're constantly talking about heavy topics and doing panels like these where we discuss things like depression and anxiety. So making sure you're just taking self-care time and remembering that you're a human being and that you can sit down for a second and just take time for yourself. I feel like that's really important.
Yeah, I think self-care is super important. And yeah, like especially being like a kid and like thinking about all these issues, it can be really like hard because like none of these topics are light. Like they're all very heavy and like emotionally straining to think about, like how all these issues we're facing right now literally come from the unsustainable foundation of our government and how like the government like cannot fail the people it was never designed to protect. Like it was never designed to work for the people, so like when you're thinking about like the root of all these issues and what's happening today, like it's definitely a lot. And I think what's helped me the most honestly has been working with Youth vs. Apocalypse, like to work with other youth who are like around my age group who are doing such amazing things. Like it's so inspiring, and also like just to talk and debrief at the end of the day of what's going on and like what we can do. It just like instead of dwelling, I guess, on all the negatives and like just like not good things happening, just like to actually talk about what we can do, I think is a much healthier way of approaching this issue than just being like overwhelmed by everything and just thinking about like what can I do realistically and like how can I also like sustain myself in the process.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the climate crisis is like a very scary thing that's kind of always there. And I really liked everything that you guys were saying about taking time for yourselves, remembering that you're a person who might not know everything and you're not going to solve the climate crisis on your own, and continuing to work with other people and having realistic expectations for yourself and making sure you're not pushing yourself to the place where you can no longer actually productively help. And I think that all of those things are really important. I have one question from the chat that was just wanted to hear a little bit about how you personally got involved with the movement. We talked about what inspired you, but more practically, like how you were able to connect with the organization you're now working with and things like that. And Aaron, it would be great if you would be willing to start us off with that question.
The internet's an amazing thing, really. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. I spend so much of my time watching cat videos, but when I'm not doing that, I can connect with anybody I want. You know, I can find experts, and as long as I come off in a compelling way, you know, if they find me, you know, worth listening to, then I can potentially get their attention. So when I started my solar project, I wouldn't have been able to do it without the internet. I found a solar expert in California who works with high schoolers to build solar projects, and I wouldn't have been able to find this person without the internet. So it's incredibly crucial. I pretty much, yeah, that's internet. So yeah, if you have a thought or an idea, I mean, I would say just first thing you do is go to the internet and just try to find people who are working on it and reach out.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Want to answer the question a little bit, but I joined YVA last year, like a week before the September 20th strike, where it was International Climate Strike Day, and we had about 20,000 to 40,000 people. We had a lot of different estimates that day, walking through the streets of San Francisco. And you know, I joined a week right before, so it was like pretty intense to see all like the organizing and all the other, you know, the last effects and everything like that. But really, you know, I wasn't really an organizer. I was just an activist, and but I was still, you know, interested in climate advocacy. And so I just started to join calls and, you know, talk to them more and get to know the YVA people more and really, you know, tell them more about myself as a poet and as an activist. And so that's how I really got involved, just getting to know people and, you know, being myself and also sort of remembering that we're still kids and we can have fun and stuff. Yeah. So.
I think for me anyway, really concretely, I have always sort of been interested in climate and in the environment and in waste reduction a lot, actually. And so I was part of the green team in high school, and I'm part of the, you know, equivalent club in college. So that was sort of where I found like-minded friends and sort of got exposure to the types of issues that a climate activist could work on. But I think specifically how I found climate change makers is through my network. Don't underestimate the power of the people you know. Even if it's not a fancy person with a powerful title, you can accomplish so much when you find somebody who sees the problem the way you do. And I think I met one of my other co-founders, Eliza, one of my other co-founders of Climate Change Makers, through the alum network of my school. I decided to take the semester off. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew that I didn't want to be a guinea pig for my college's COVID response plan. And I started messaging all the alums that I could find who LinkedIn told me worked in the climate space. I literally searched Sierra Club, National Resources Defense Council, and I just started messaging. And Eliza and I got on the phone. You would be so surprised how many folks are excited to talk to young people about climate. And Eliza and I got on the phone and she said, wow, it sounds like you see the problem the same way I do. I'm dreaming up this thing. What do you think? And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, without a doubt. And then we kept calling different people that we knew and we kept putting together a team. And then now we have more than 300 volunteers from all over the country who've been taking regular action per week over Zoom for the past 3 months. It's like, don't count yourself out and lean into your networks. So really, networking sounds scary, but all you have to do is say, I'm Madeline. I am worried about the climate crisis. I'm really interested in hearing about your work. I have this following idea. Would you like to talk for 15 minutes on Zoom? Zoom really breaks down a lot of these boundaries. So think about who you know from school, who might have gone to your high school, who might have gone to your middle school, some folks who are a few years older than you. You can ask a lot of schools have like offices of sort of, at college, it'll be career development. In high school, it might be college counseling. You might have a science teacher who has some friends who are connected. Just don't be afraid to ask the people who you think are better connected to you than you for their connections too. That's a really great form of networking as well.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I think definitely taking advantage of like the resources that we have at this time and age, where we can look things up on the internet, we can find people, we can access people, or we can talk to people via Zoom, I think is really important. And I totally agree with all of those things that you're saying. And hopefully people will be able to also start getting involved in climate activism. So we discussed a little bit about like the mental pressures and the fear and the emotions that come working with climate change. And I was wondering specifically for Anaya and Katerina and Madeline, as you're all kind of youth activists, how do you deal with managing those emotions and working in this climate activism field and balancing school or other things that I'm sure that you have to deal with at this point in your life? Yeah, I was just wondering because a lot of people watching are high school students. Yeah.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm still getting better at, setting aside time for myself, of course. But, I have to listen to what I give my advice. So basically, I think the best thing you can do is just, give yourself time and, check what best works for you, how much time you can provide for things, because it's sometimes it's okay to say no, or sometimes it's okay, I'm gonna postpone this and we can talk later. And that's what I have trouble doing, just saying, oh, can we do this a different time? I automatically think that I have to do this and this and this and this all on the same day. But that could really stress you out. And so really just being aware of yourself and your needs is really important, and setting aside time for yourself, but also, for school and things like that, and to just, talk to friends or stuff, whatever your hobbies are. So yeah.
I would say, I mean, I took a semester off to think about this and work on this. And so if you end up at a college who will let you do that, it's not really an option for high school, but if you end up at a college that will let you do that, consider it. It's really wonderful to have so much time to dedicate to it. But personally, I'm kind of nervous about going back to school in this coming term. I am worried that I'm not going to be able to dedicate as much time as I want to climate activism while taking care of classes and maintaining my own mental health and stuff. But I think that Anaya really hit the nail on the head, right? Like, you have to assess what you have to give and what time you have. So I think that's going to mean that I have to sit down and I have to look at my schedule and say, I have 5 hours a week. What's the most productive outlet? Is it, staying involved at Climate Change Makers? Is it going to be really educating myself on sort of what the new lay of the land is? Is it going to be focusing on my on-campus environmental efforts? Like, given what my bandwidth is, yeah, first define your bandwidth and then think about what is the most productive use of that time.
Yeah, I think you all touched on some really good things to keep in mind if you're an activist or trying to get more involved or wherever you are in this movement. I think as climate activists, it's easy to get really wrapped up in what we're working on, and just like, because all these issues that we're working on, I mean, they are life and death issues. So like, it's easy to get wrapped up and be like, I have to do this 24/7. Like, I need to do this now. Like, this has to be done today. Like, there is no more time for this. I can't do this tomorrow. It has to be done now. Like, all these issues seem like so incredibly urgent, because they are. But the truth is that if we're giving all our energy to this movement, we can't be the best activists that we can, because you have to give energy to yourself. At the end of the day, you have to replenish that energy, because then you're no longer useful to the movement, but you also can't even take care of yourself. And that's a really big problem. And if you find yourself in a place where you're really anxious and depressed because of thinking about all these issues, or because, being an activist, like, it's hard to have all these issues on your mind all the time. But I think if you've gotten to that point of like continuous anxiety or depression, um, that means you've neglected yourself in the process of being an activist. Like, you have to take time to yourself. Like, that's essential. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing. And I think that taking that time for yourself and making sure that you're figuring out the right balance and kind of tinkering around with that, and self-assessing is really important. We talked about kind of how we're dealing with some of the negative impacts maybe, or like the mental pressures and emotions and fears that come with working in this field. So just a question to kind of open up to everyone is, we talked a little bit about how we're dealing with this, but do you have one specific thing that has really helped you a lot? Such as like if your friends and like your community has really helped you, a certain way that you've connected with people and things like that. Yeah, it would be great if you could just share one specific example that maybe people can also try to do in their own life. And maybe we could start off with Alan if you want to share anything.
Yeah, that's a really tough one, because over the last year, or almost last year, since March, I've not been able to interact with the people who really keep me going as I had before. And so that has been something that has really um, kept me strong in all of this up until the COVID crisis, is being able to get together with other people and share ideas and just collaborate and make plans about how it is that we can achieve sort of our immediate goals. One thing I'd like to say about trying to keep a balance between keeping yourself sane and being the desire to be involved 24/7. One thing that I really think we should keep in mind is that this is an urgent problem. We really need to get on this, but this is also going to be a problem for the rest of the century. It's not going away. So when I think about this, I think about, okay, this is just the fact of life that I'm going to be dealing with the climate issue for the rest of my life. And that means treat it like a marathoner, not like a sprinter. That's the kind of thing that really kind of makes it possible for me to put a lot of the immediacy on the back burner and be able to do continuous progress on what it is that we're doing.
Yeah, that's definitely really helpful. And I think considering it as kind of a long-term race is really important, since a lot of the things that we're looking at as climate activists are everything. We need to fix all of this now. And if we don't, there are going to be major repercussions. And while that may be true, we also are going to have to keep fixing things as time goes on. So I think that that's a really great way to think about it. Yeah, do any of you guys also have anything to kind of add on to that, or to talk about the ways that you're dealing with this emotional stress that comes with working in this field?
Yeah, I can comment. So I'm working in the more entrepreneurship field related to it, and it definitely is lonely, and especially during COVID. And when I first started in March, I was pretty depressed actually, and then I found other entrepreneurs who are similar, like young entrepreneurs who can have similar mindsets, who can help each other. So now I have like a network of about 5 other entrepreneurs who we talk a lot, like every week, all the time, about what we're doing, and just give each other and help each other out. So that's pretty much it. That really, really helps. And then therapy. Therapy helps too. So yeah, mixture of both.
Yeah, and really quickly, I just wanted to ask, is there a specific way you were able to find like-minded individuals who you could kind of bounce ideas off of or talk to, and that maybe you could recommend or kind of talk on?
Well, I got involved with Youth Apocalypse, or like I literally found out about Youth Apocalypse from the strike that I went to. And I literally like saw Youth Apocalypse and I was like, oh my God, these people are amazing. Like, how can I join them? Like, how can I work with these people? Like, I want to be doing what they're doing. And yeah, I would say just start like showing up, to different actions that you hear about. Also social media nowadays can be a good tool to like find different actions going on, like different protests. Now there's a lot more like online actions and like panels and webinars going on. But just start getting involved with something that genuinely interests you and will bring you joy, because there's many different forms of activism. Like Anaya, for example, is a really talented poet. Like there's many ways to get involved. And yeah, just find something that interests you and start showing up, and then you're bound to make some sort of connections.
Just DM people on Instagram. I'm dead serious. Like if, for example, if I found like Alliance for Climate Education, for example, ACE, they have an awesome Instagram page. Why not just try DMing them, or like go on their website and find the contact us and just say, here's my name, here's what I'm interested in, like anyway, tell me how I can best plug in. They might just redirect you to a sign up page, and that's totally great. That's what Katarina's talking about for showing up. But just start by introducing yourself, start by asking people who you know, what are you doing to take action, and how can I show up with you next time?
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. I guess as kind of a final question, since we are nearing the end of the hour, is what is one big takeaway or piece of advice that you want people to take away from this panel, or that you want to reiterate? And if you have any other comments as well, you can feel free to kind of say them now. And maybe we can just go down the line with this, starting with Aaron, and then, yeah, continuing in a kind of alphabetical order.
So my main piece of advice for if your goal is to want to have impacts in the world is to just go out and start doing something. Talk, mainly talking to people. So like first, talk to people on LinkedIn, on Instagram, whatever. Understand, get a better understanding of the situation and how you want to be involved in the climate space. If you want to be involved in the technology, if you want to be involved in the policy, and then just take action. And I think something that I've learned is that, the thoughts in your head are only so true, but in reality, you have to understand the situation. And the only way to really do that is just to go out there and put yourself out there. And you have nothing to lose. Secondly, what do you have to lose? That's something else you got to consider. Probably nothing.
And then Alan, would you kind of like to speak on that?
Sure.
As well?
Sure. We live in a very polarized time right now. And it's not just politically polarized, but every public policy issue seems to get polarized as well. And so we commonly think about there are climate activists over there, and then there are deniers over there, and it's a fight between the two. We're going to fight for climate change, for making a difference. And I resist that. I don't think of myself as a fighter. I think of myself as a worker. I am working to bring about certain solutions. And the way that my work can be most effective is to not think about people as my enemy. Instead, think about everyone as being kind of on a ladder, from at the bottom, the deniers, at the top, climate champions, and everybody's somewhere on this ladder. And what I try to do is talk to people where they are, find out why they think what they think, and do so respectfully. And in the progress of that, we understand that everyone is a potential ally, and we can move them just one step up the ladder. And if we treat it that way, what we'll find is that the kind of baseline about attitudes about climate will rise to the point where we'll get this tipping point, and we'll see some real changes. So I try to resist thinking about this as a struggle or fight, but it's simply a conversation, work that we're doing in order to change public opinion.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, Anaya, if you would like to kind of.
Yeah, I think it's important for me to touch on this as a person of color, as a Black person. I guess to just really educate yourself and to know if you are interested in, being a climate advocate or an activist, checking your privilege and checking where you stand, in the world, just really being aware of what is accessible to other people and what might not be accessible to other people, and just, really educating yourself on not only what affects you, but on what affects your community, your friends, and, if you are a white person, what affects people of color, because, you know, at the end of the day, people of color will be getting hit first by the climate crisis. And so just really educating yourself on that and, checking your privilege, checking where you stand. That's the best advice I can give to you.
Perfect, thank you so much. Katerina, would you like to kind of share as well?
I think everyone brought some really good points to the table. I guess I would add, if you're looking to get involved right now, there are many organizations that have open calls every so often where like anyone can join. And also like Youth vs. Apocalypse, for example, we have multiple campaigns, so you can find maybe something that you're particularly passionate about. Like there's the Green New Deal campaign, there's the Youth versus Big Oil campaign, there's many different campaigns, and they're open to anyone who's interested, like ages 12 to 19, I believe. So there are many ways to get involved, and all you have to do is just start showing up. And yeah.
Great, thank you so much. And Madeline, if you had kind of like a little closing thought or thing you want to emphasize, that would be great.
I think the thing that I want to leave you with is the sort of the framing of the issue. The issue is a political one. We are squarely in a political crisis. And so it doesn't matter if you're not old enough to vote, you can still make your voice heard by showing up in the streets, by going to a citizens climate lobby meeting where they'll train you to go like knock on the doors of your representatives, by coming to a climate change makers meeting where we'll sort of try to find that space in the middle. You can phone bank for elections. You can get into the streets. You can make signs. You can tell all your friends about why this is an issue. Like you have so much power. You have so much strength, and you have something really unique to give. No matter how old you are, no matter where you come from, like who you know. I think, yeah, we have a political problem, and you have the power to change it. I swear you do. So I think just pull as many people off the sidelines as you can. And feel free to reach out, I think, to any of us. And we'd be happy to point you to the right direction. Ellen can make sure that you have our contact information. Seriously, we would be happy to point you in the right direction, any of us.
Yeah, and I can send out some of those informations in an email probably for everyone who signed up through the website. And I wanted to thank all of the panelists for everything that you've said today, all of your insight. I think it was really inspiring and helpful, and you gave a lot of great advice for people who are looking to kind of get into the environmental activism side of things. And I also wanted to thank everyone at YCA, all of the leads, for all of their help running this program, and especially to Camille for helping us with the tech and everything like that today. And I also wanted to thank everyone who tuned in and spent their time and attention and are taking this hour out of their Saturday morning to learn more about climate change. So really quickly, I just wanted to give a reminder to everyone to please fill out the survey that should be linked into the chat by this Wednesday, November 11th, in order to be entered into a raffle to win a book called Youth to Power, Your Voice and How to Use It, and a tote bag. And that link will also be posted in the description of this video later today and will be emailed out to everyone who registered, along with some of the emails of the panelists. And the next panel of the series will be next week on November 14th at the same time, which is 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific time. And this next panel will focus on careers in climate change and some of the things that we can do to help combat climate change in the rest of our lives as we maybe grow up or as through our careers. And it will feature professionals who are working in climate change and who are able to speak upon their experiences and give advice related to that. And again, I wanted to thank everyone so much for coming and give a big thank you to all of the panelists for their insight in this topic. And I hope to see everyone again next week.